So those are the numbers of players who have had their.
So trivia question for you. What was Byron Whizzer White more famous for?
Being a Supreme Court justice.
That's right. There you go. We're such a highly educated program here.
Yes, we are.
Welcome to Wait, What? Sports Biz Chat with DP and McGhee, the podcast that takes an often irreverent, sometimes cynical, and on occasion a serious look at the business of sports. I'm your co-host, David Parro.
And I'm Tim McGhee.
I'm not sure we've ever seen the emotional nature of sport laid out to bear so openly as we did on Sunday during the final round of the Masters, Tim. It obviously gives credence to why sports command the attention that they do, why they remain so coveted by broadcasters and streaming services. I don't want to lead the witness here in terms of that's where you wanted to start the show, but I'll leave it at that and ask you what's on your mind.
Well, at first I thought you might have known I was crying because for the first time in how many years I didn't pick Rory in my prediction to win the Masters. But yes, you're absolutely right. The emotion, the pure joy, and the fact that he took a bit of a roller coaster ride during that final round. I can't help but think of Jim McKay's old, introduction to the wide world of sports, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. But I loved Rory's line, I've got to go get a green jacket.
Yeah.
When he's with his friends. The one thing I didn't like coming out of the tournament is these people, these so-called pundits talking about he didn't deserve to win because he double bogeyed. The fact of the matter is, at the end of 73 holes, he won, and so he deserved to win.
It's the most ridiculous thing to even think that way. I mean, emotions are so obviously part of it, and the thing about Rory is he wears his emotions on his sleeve, right? You saw every feeling he was feeling, I think, which made it such dramatic television. Mm-hmm. So going back to your point, the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat, we didn't know until the very end what we were going to see. It would have been an agony for him to lose that. He loses the lead very, very quickly by the second hole after starting the round, 3 strokes up, I believe, gets it back. Bryson folds.
Oh, like a
Patrick
lounge
Reed
chair.
almost makes a comeback. Justin Rose is out of the tournament and then roars back. And then what happened to Rory on 13, where I basically just shanked the shot, a wedge shot that he hits. All he needed to do was get it on the green. He would have been walking away with the tournament. So he double bogeys that, ends up going into 15, has a tough approach shot, hits one of the most unbelievable shots I've ever seen to set up for an eagle putt, misses that putt, which would have put it away probably, comes back, hits a great shot on 16, birdie 17, which was amazing, hits a great tee shot on 18, and then fans his approach shot into the bunker, can't get up and down, almost does, but can't get up and down, goes into a playoff. He hits the exact same drive on 18. So he put it in play, and he had the exact same shot he had to hit that he just fanned into the bunker, and he freaking nails it. Drops the putt. I mean, that's golf. It's an emotional game that way, and he has won the Masters, the 6th player only to win the career Grand Slam, an amazing accomplishment. It was great drama, and getting back to the business side, the numbers were great, 12.7 million viewers.
35% from last year.
The biggest viewership for a final round since 2018. Peaked at 19.5 million during the 7 to 7:15. So obviously people were, kind of tuned into this idea or hearing that it was going into a playoff and rushed to watch. So listen, I thought it was amazing television. It's why we love sport. It was everything that we ask for from live sports. And back to the comment I made at the opening of the show, it's why sports drive what they do in bidding wars from broadcast partners, because it's the one thing that you do have to watch live.
Yeah, I'm not the first one to say this, right? But it is the original and the ultimate reality TV programming.
Yeah. It was rather special. So I want to go back to the prediction thing. So, right, it was the first time you haven't picked Rory when it comes to a golf prediction. Our our guest last week, Jason Langwell from Tomorrow Golf and the TGL, he predicted it right. And he even had I think the very funny comment, whether he knew or not, he said, let's give Rory a shot and have Tim pick somebody else, because we hadn't revealed our picks yet. You went ahead and picked someone else. By the way, I mean, Scotty played okay. Morikawa didn't play poorly. He made the cut, but he wasn't in contention at any point, or serious contention at any point.
I don't want to speak for you, but I will never make a career as a prognosticator in any form.
Well, I don't think either of us will, but it's fun. It's fun to do it, and we are going to keep doing it, no doubt about that. One of the things that will now be discussed again is we had the final pairing in the final round was Rory McIlroy, one of the major faces of the PGA Tour, and for that matter, the DP World Tour as well, because he still plays to some degree on that tour. And LIV, and the face of LIV in a lot of ways now, Bryson DeChambeau, who is playing top-level golf, unlike some of the other players that did migrate over to LIV. It supported all that we've talked about in terms of all the parties saying we want the best players playing against each other, and I think that certainly is the case. Still have all the challenges that we spoke about in last week's show on there, but certainly that type of rivalry, I think, is good. I don't know. DeChambeau, I think, has created such a great personality for himself and how he handles social media. And I don't know why he felt baited into answering the question that he did about, did you talk to Rory during the round? Some golfers talk and some golfers don't. Everybody knows that. And he made it a little bit of, he wouldn't talk to me. And that, of course, has gotten a massive amount of attention, which I think detracts from both sides of that. I'm guessing that Bryson wishes he had that comment back, but it certainly adds a little, I guess, more drama to this LIV versus Tour.
What I would say is, if you take the approach that both of them took, in hindsight, Rory's was the correct one.
Yeah.
So whether or not he chose not to speak to Bryson because he wanted to be dialed in, or because of the LIV PGA Tour, we'll probably never know. And it's not really important, but I agree with you. I think we could have done without that comment, because to your point, players approach their rounds differently, and we have to respect whether somebody wants to be chatty and gregarious, or if somebody wants to be, totally focused and keep quiet during their round.
Yeah. Yeah. Tiger notoriously stoic. Jack was fairly stoic. Lee Trevino was a yapper, right? So it was, that was the way. And Bryson has found a new level to his game by being very fan friendly, let's say. But that doesn't mean that's where the greatness aspect, they're not owed that once they're inside the ropes. They're out there to win a golf tournament. And as I said, Rory wears his emotions on his sleeve. You could tell his heart was pounding at certain moments. You could tell his mouth was dry at certain moments. And television captured every bit of that for our pleasure. And it was a great, great ride.
And to your earlier point, how good would it be to see players like DeChambeau playing against players like Rory more than 4 times a year at max?
The parties need to get together, set what the primary objective is, and then take out of the equation the things that really don't matter to the golf fan, and then the players as well. And I think they'll get there. It's just taking a lot longer than any of us thought. All right, you want to move on to the NBA a little bit?
Sure. What do you got?
Well, I mean, we're heading into the playoffs. We are now in this SoFi play-in tournament, which is something I'm kind of excited about, the branding around this. And I have a lot of friends that just, will say they don't watch the NBA anymore. They find it unwatchable during the regular season. And I'm not saying that they're completely wrong, because I don't tune in all that often to NBA regular season. But they have the in-season tournament now, which has added some drama. The play-in tournament's been around for a little bit, but I think they're merchandising it a little bit more now. So the television numbers, as we look at the season, they were down fairly significantly early on, but the second half of the season, they picked up. a lot more attention drawn on the game with the Luka Doncic trade to LA from Dallas, and the ratings stabilized themselves quite a bit. So the overall season, from the national game perspective, they averaged 1.53 million, so just over 1.5 million across ABC, ESPN, and TNT. So it was down 2%. Not insignificant, but not as down as it had been earlier in the season. So I think there was some excitement brought back. Luka playing back in Dallas the other night, where he went and what great athletes do, right? They go in the big moments and they drop big games like he did in Dallas. That averaged 2.26 million. So, the stars of the league, like Luka and LeBron, they do numbers, and I think Luka going to LA certainly has reinvigorated to a degree the league and excitement around it.
And it certainly seems to have reinvigorated Doncic himself.
Mm-hmm.
He's been playing very well, and it's showing up on the commercial side. His jersey is now #1 in sales. And I would not be. I'm not making a prediction here. I would not be surprised though if the Lakers make a deep run into the playoffs. I do think that Oklahoma City is going to be very difficult to beat out west, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Lakers make a deep run in the playoffs this year.
I would tend to agree. The players that were there, Luka comes in. Does it could it change the dynamic? I mean, Luka is a player that needs to have the ball in his hand. LeBron's a player that needs to have. You always wonder about situations like that, but it hasn't seemed to be the case. And agree that they could make the kind of run you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, they only play with one ball, but the good teams know when to go with the hot hand. Look at Golden State last night. They finally won. They were 0-3 in playing games before last night. They finally won, and Jimmy Butler dropped 38. And you would think that Steph Curry is going to be your go-to guy in that type of game, but Jimmy Butler really stepped it up. One of the first, if not certainly the best performance he's put on since joining Golden State from Miami.
One thing that we will be saying goodbye to is Inside the NBA on TNT. They had their last broadcast, which is a little sad in a lot of ways because that show became so important, I think, to the league, and I think did so much for the league, and the combination of the former stars that were on that group, along with, of course, the great Ernie Johnson, say goodbye. But the show in concept is moving over to ESPN. So we'll have a taste of it, obviously, moving into the future, because TNT is no longer going to be a partner with the NBA, which is sad because they've been great for the league.
At least here in the States, they're still going to have broadcast rights in Europe, I believe. But yes, it'll be. But I do think if anybody knows how to do a great game broadcast, it's ESPN. So I'm looking forward to them, with the new deal and some of the new broadcasters that are coming. NBC coming back. I think maybe we'll try to get Mark Lazarus back on to talk about that. That was something he talked about when he was on the show, and now that they've got it. But ESPN does a great game broadcast, great promotions. NBC, I'm sure, will do a great job as well. Can we do a shout out to sponsorship or a sponsorship shout out?
How do we feel about these sponsorship deals?
Ace is the place. Ace Hardware signed on as the official hardware and home improvement retailer of Major League Baseball, which is not news in and of itself. I think it's a natural category. What's news is that Major League Baseball had gone almost 25 years without a sponsor in that category. I can only imagine what those sales meetings within Major League Baseball have been like for the last quarter of a century. When are we going to get another hardware store partner?
Yeah, it seems so natural on so many levels from a home repair standpoint.
Great audience alignment.
Yeah, it certainly does seem that way. Although we hear, more about, like we were just talking about SoFi being the sponsor of the play-in tournament. We tend to hear a little more of the tech plays, I suppose. And this is a category that used to be a very standard category for a sponsorship. And baseball has the ultimate somewhat Americana, somewhat home ownership. All those things just feel right. I mean, the whole game is based on going home, as George Carlin used to say. And a hardware store is the ultimate, in that old throwback feel to Americana, I guess.
I got one more thing before the break, if we have time.
Yeah.
The University of Colorado announced that they are going to be retiring the numbers of Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. So first, to me, retiring somebody's number, there should be some distance between when that player's career is over and when they're honored with such a big occasion, right? Having your number retired is probably the biggest deal you can get from an individual team. If you're in your sport, it's the Hall of Fame. It's from a team or a school, it's having your number retired. And I remember I had a dear friend, or I still have a dear friend from college, who was elected to Cornell's Hall of Fame. She was a gymnast in her first year of eligibility. I think it was 5 years after graduation, or 15 years, excuse me, after graduation. And I called her to congratulate her. She said, yeah, but now I have nothing to look forward to for the rest of my life. So we don't know what kind of career Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter are going to have, but I just think it's a bit ridiculous to have their numbers retired immediately. They probably haven't even moved out of their apartment in Boulder yet. I think it's particularly silly with Shedeur Sanders. But Travis Hunter won the Heisman Trophy, recognized the best college football player. Shedeur Sanders was 13-12 as a starter, and he came in 8th in the Heisman voting. Is that really worthy of having one's number retired? To me, it's just the university kissing Coach Sanders' butt.
Yeah, and listen, it's a university's decision on how to do that, and if they choose, I suppose, to make sure that they're doing what you just said, that you include him, because they were a pretty lethal combination, I guess, with Hunter as receiver when he was on the offensive side and Shedeur at the quarterback position. So maybe they went in feeling like they were a package deal. I agree with you that it doesn't rise to that level. I don't know who else is in the Hall of Fame or the retired number at the University of Colorado, but I imagine it's some great talent, maybe ones with a lot better stats than Shedeur Sanders. But their call. Don't be telling universities what they should be doing. You don't want.
Wow. Wow, my co-host getting mildly and
well, I'm
subtly
just saying,
subversive. I love it.
We don't want to be doing that, Hey, one other thing I want to touch on, and we have a guest coming up. We're going to talk mostly about the college side, but I kind of see this, and I'm like, anytime I hear an owner, complaining about, things are a little tough. Not that they do that all the time, but the NFL released its numbers recently. I don't know if you saw that. $23 billion in the just completed fiscal year. So each team will get a $416 million distribution from the league's national media sponsorship and licensing revenue. Those are the things that are cut up evenly across the board, part of the revenue share of what comes in from the league level, and that's up nearly 9% from the previous year. Of course, the Packers, because they have that weird ownership situation, never actually publish that information. Anyway, it's the money machine that is the NFL just continues to roll.
Yes, it does. And just to close the loop on your question about other numbers being retired, here are the numbers that have been retired by the University of Colorado football program. Number 24, Byron White, better known as Whizzer White, was a quarterback in 36 and 37. Went on to be into the College Football Hall of Fame. Joe Romick, I don't know, was an offensive lineman from 59 to 61. He was a captain. Number 11, Bobby Anderson, played running back from 67 to 69. And Rashaan Salaam, number 19, 1993 and 94, and he won the Heisman Trophy. So those are the numbers of players who have had their.
So, trivia question for you: what was Byron Whizzer White more famous for?
Being a Supreme Court justice.
That's right. There you go. We're such a highly educated program here.
Yes, we are. Take a break.
Let's do it.
It's time for our guest.
We are back, and we are really pleased to welcome this week's guest. TJ Ciro is the Senior Vice President and Head of Strategic Partnerships at Opendorse, where he oversees all of the business development efforts and relationships that Opendorse has with brands and schools and athletes. So TJ, welcome to the show, and thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me on. Excited to chat.
Yeah. So let's get started. Opendorse touts itself as the world's leading athlete influencer program. How many athletes are there on the Opendorse platform?
Yeah, today we're well over 130,000 athletes across the country. 115,000 of those are student athletes. So yeah, we've been doing this almost 13 years, well before the start of NIL, and we were applying tech to the endorsement industry with pro athletes and alumni from certain schools. But yeah, where we've really seen that hockey stick growth is with the advent of NIL, July 1, 2021. And it's not slowing down.
I can imagine. Let us know how an athlete is going to learn about Opendorse. How do they get onboarded? Kind of walk us through that whole process.
Sure. Yeah, Opendorse is free for any athlete to download and sign up. Think about it almost like LinkedIn meets Cameo meets Venmo. And there's multiple ways that athletes get onboarded. One, they just hear about it and sign up on their own. The majority of athletes get signed up via their college or university. And so I'll take a step back. If you think about a marketplace, there's two sides to it, the supply and demand. And on the supply side, those are the athletes. And the easiest way for us to get 500 athletes at a time to be signed on is for a school to say, hey, we'd love to partner with Opendorse because we want to tap into various resources they have, whether it's software and technology to help athletes understand their brand via education, build their brand with content, and receive deals or also be compliant. So there's lots of different tools that schools use to provide resources to their athletes on campus. And when we do partner with a school, we'll batch upload hundreds of athletes at a time. And so yeah, once they're there, then I'm on the demand side of the marketplace. So brands and fans sometimes, but for the most part, it's brands everywhere, one from your local mom and pop shop to Fortune 50 companies who want to tap into the audience, the passionate, engaged audiences of these athletes. So it's really simple for them. It takes a couple of minutes to build out a profile like a LinkedIn page, connect their bank account so they can check out after they do receive deals, but it doesn't take very long at all. The easiest way I explain it to sometimes people is if we want to send a deal to an athlete and get them to sign up, it's like getting someone to sign up for Venmo. If you want to get $20 from someone, like in order to get that money, you just got to sign up quickly and they're good to go.
So just to follow up on that, is there any need or for the athletes to get ongoing support and training? And if so, what does that look like?
Yeah, as part of the experience the student athletes receive when Opendorse is officially partnered with a school, they receive ongoing education, whether it's on-site education, where we'll send someone to meet with the athletic department, all student athletes, to talk to them about understanding what is NIL, right? Like imagine you're 18 years old, stepping foot on a campus. It's your first week, and your head's spinning from everything that's going on, from your schedule in terms of where you need to be on campus, when you need to train, when your matches are, tutors, et cetera, and you're still trying to get your bearings around campus. Oh, and now you need to be a polished sports marketer because you have the ability to monetize your name, image, and likeness. That's a lot. That's a lot for someone who they're a professional influencer and they live and breathe this stuff. So what we're trying to do is slow it down and have that 101, 201, 301, 401 experience as they go through their years in school, so that we're growing with them and we're able to provide more resources and additional skills. So not just understanding what it is by the time you're further along in your journey, having the ability to understand how to maximize various platforms and how to make the most of your opportunity and think a little bit long-term. So Yeah, there's various levels of support. Even if they just sign up for free, in the Opendorse app, you still have access to various opportunities that brands post there. You'll never delete the content that you have been provided through the various schools or relationships and people that plug into you. And there's other education resources that are in there. Think like masterclass type stuff. So even if a school isn't working with Opendorse, there's still ways for those athletes to still provide value, and they're also available in the marketplace forever for transactions, for people to find them, whether it's brands, fans, donors, you name it.
I'm going to take a step back a little bit and ask you to walk us through the primary things you focus on day to day within your job as the head of strategic partnerships with Opendorse.
Yeah, I think I have the best job in the company, and I'll explain why. But yeah, so we have, again, if you think about the two sides of our business, just to give a little more context and color, the college side of our business is where we'll go partner with colleges and collectives, and a lot of the efforts on that side of the business are tied to recruiting nowadays, right? So now that all these people can transact with athletes for NIL transactions and provide value to them and maybe influence where they're going to go play, a lot of those efforts, they use the term NIL a lot there, because NIL in the media is typically tied to, when the media talks about it, pay for play, recruiting, the transfer portal, right? And so they'll use the term NIL a lot. Now, on the flip side, where I live with my team, we're on the commercial side. So what we're trying to do is help brands get a business outcome when working with athletes as influencers. So we are trying to help brands work with athletes and say, you know what? Athletes get have an engagement rate more than twice that of traditional influencers. Because if you follow a random student athlete, there's a reason you do, and you give a you know what about everything that they have to say, and you want to support them. And because of that, brands have for years have wanted to tap into college fan bases. That's why they've sponsored these schools. Now they have the ability to work with the most influential people on those campuses, who are the current student athletes. And that's what we help them do. So that's why we don't use the term NIL, because a VP of marketing, a CMO, they're not interested in being part of the recruiting/retention machine. What they're trying to do is get a business outcome, and they spend money on influencer marketing, right? Influencer marketing is that those budgets now are exceeding search budgets, which is wild. And because that's how Gen Z, that's where they go to make decisions, and that's how there's just a ton of influence there. And so we always say internally, like, athletes have influence, but they're not influencers. And there's a reason for that, because they're busy, they have other things going on. But when an athlete says the right thing, right time, right place, they have superpowers, because their engagement level is more than twice that of a traditional influencers. What we do is help brands tap into that. And because if anybody's ever worked with talent, and you've worked with more than a handful, it's a lot. It is a lot to manage, all the way from strategy to pitch to execution to payment to providing a 1099 at the end of the year. And what our team handles all of that. So a brand may say, like, I'll give you one example. When EA Sports wanted to bring back their video game, right? They needed to get signatures for over 11,000 athletes to opt into being, providing their name, image, and likeness so they could participate in the video game. To get those opt-ins, they needed the top 100, 150 college football players to first say, hey, I'm in, because they have a lot of influence. And once they did that, they saw over 7,000 signups within the first 24 hours. And so that happened because we were able to, first of all, negotiate, contract, pitch them, and get everything executed. And then they were able to, hit the ground running. So that's an example of working at scale, because that's really hard to do. But when you apply tech and an experienced team, that's what we do.
One of the things that has driven me crazy is that very rarely does a term come along that so explicitly says what it means, name, image, likeness,
Yes.
that is so misunderstood. It's the most, and it's literally explains itself, yet it's totally misunderstood.
You're 100% right. That's why we do try to distance ourselves from it, just due to the connotation there. And and the associations. And so the easiest way I've always explained NIL over the last 4 years is NIL isn't about providing different and new types of benefits and things for student athletes. It's just now leveling the playing field so they have the same rights as every other student on campus. If you were the best musician on campus and someone to hire you for lessons or to make an appearance, there's nothing stopping them. But because they were a student athlete, they weren't able to do things like that. So really, it's just giving them the same rights that every other student on campus has.
I had a quick follow-up before my next question. Go back to the beginning of your last response, where you said that a lot of the times the collectives and the athletic departments use the lure of NIL money as a recruitment tool. Do they specifically use Opendorse as a differentiator when they're talking to those student athletes? Because Opendorse has become very well known in the industry. Is that something that athletic departments use? Hey, if you come here, you're going to be on the Opendorse platform.
Yeah, I'd like to believe we legitimize this whole process. You know, there's a lot of people who will use the term wild, wild west, but I can tell you inside the proverbial four walls of Opendorse, it doesn't feel like that, because everything we do is data driven and we're seeing things kind of before they happen, or we can see where dollars are going and what's happening. And so on that college side, yes, listen, there's a lot of conversations that happen. If this House settlement goes through, starting July 1st of this year, schools will be sharing revenue directly with student athletes, not having to just rely on the collectives and donor groups to have those types of conversations with student athletes. And so we look at ourselves as an operating system, right? We put the student athlete at the center and we allow various parties to plug into them, whether it's the school, the collective, or the brands and fans on the other side. But yes, we are the only solution out there who's working full service throughout the ecosystem. So we have competitors in various parts of the ecosystem, whether it's on compliance or software and content sharing. But in terms of providing being an operating system for payments, but also providing this third-party NIL, which we believe is the next forefront of this battle right now, that's where our value prop lies and where we have this 13-year head start. Because God bless anybody that tries to start this up right now and has to learn all the lessons we've learned over onboarding 130,000 athletes, working with thousands of brands, executing campaigns with thousands of athletes at a time. Those are really tough lessons to learn. And so schools right now are leaning on us heavily for a few new solutions that we have too, like a new solution we have called Team Builder, where think about it like a GM tool, right? If you are the GM of a specific team at a specific school at a specific level, because of all the transaction data that we have from collectives and brands, we understand if you are a running back in the Big Ten, and at a certain level, what your comp package should be, and at least have a range for that. So we're helping schools right now figure out what they're going to do within that $20.5 million cap.
Very interesting. You mentioned earlier that onboarding an student athlete is very simple. You compared it to setting up a Venmo account, but can you take us a little deeper into what an athlete's experience is once they're onboarded and say a brand wants to avail themselves of that student athlete's services? How does that work for the student athlete?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, once you're signed up and you're available for people to find you for opportunities, there's a couple different ways when we're working with a brand that we can engage with an athlete. One is a straightforward pitch. We know the athletes we want to pitch. We build out the brief, the dollar amount, the dates, have all that information there, and they get a notification. Hey, you have a deal. And at that point, we're the platform. So it'll say you have a deal from Toyota, EA Sports, you name the brand. They open it up, they'll see the terms, the brief, what they need to do, when, how much they'll get paid for that. And if they accept that, they then will get reminders when those deliverables are due. Because we're also, within the Opendorse experience, you can't get paid as part of a no-show job. There always has to be proof along the way and quid pro quo. So if there's multiple, let's just say an athlete's supposed to get $1,000 and it's a series of 4 activities and they were broken out evenly. So every time they need to do something, they'll provide proof, like if it's a social post or an appearance. And when they upload that, it gets approved and the dollars get released at that point. So there's protection for the athlete up front because Opendorse requires payment before that deal goes out. That's how we protect the athlete from getting bogus offers and people floating things out to them when it's not a real opportunity. You know, the last thing you want is a female athlete getting asked to do an appearance at a random place and we don't know who that buyer is and we don't have any information there. So protect the athlete on the upfront in that way, but we protect the buyer on the back end by making sure that there's proof for those activities before payment is actually released to them. But that process is all super simple. As you can imagine, dealing with a lot of 18 to 22-year-olds, you can't have it be clunky. You have to know how to communicate with them, when to communicate with them, what the cadence of those communications are. And so we're very intentional and deliberate about that type of stuff. But student athletes on top of the deals, and another way, I know I'm about to jump around a little bit, but another way we can get their attention for things is we have an opportunity board. So a brand, if they're not sure who they want to work with and they want to get athletes who are going to be leaning into something, they will build out that deal similar to how they would do a pitch to one athlete, but they'll post it on the opportunity board and then they'll have all these athletes who apply and then they'll sift and sort through them and say, okay, I want this one, I don't want this one. And then they'll just accept them. And then the actual one-to-one deal goes to that athlete where they can accept it now officially to move forward. So it's a way to put something out into the universe, see who raises their hand digitally, and then have them accept that deal. So that's the deal side of it and the marketplace side. And then from a payment side as well, when they get payments and have to do things for their collective and now coming up their school, it's the same exact experience. So what's coming now in the rev share world, none of that is new to us. That's what we've been doing for a really long time. Another way that an athlete will receive value is through content. So pro properties or college athletic departments, they sit on a treasure trove of content. They're capturing images and videos all the time. And otherwise it just sits on a shelf doing nothing for nobody. And what they'll do is they'll upload it into our system. They'll tag people. We have AI photo tagging or metadata, so it can be dropped into various folders. And the athletes get access to their content so they could share it on social, keep it, look at graphics or footage of them at practice. So yeah, there's lots of different tools. And then they can also send disclosures. So if they get a deal outside of Opendorse, it's auto disclosed if they get it in Opendorse. But if they need to disclose something to their athletic department for a deal they received outside, there's compliance tools for that and education tools, like I mentioned earlier. So there's lots of different ways for them to get value once they're plugged in.
We're going to have you take a little look into your crystal ball here and try to give us some guidance. We know that the landscape in college sports is shifting here rapidly. You mentioned the house settlement situation coming out. You guys have established yourself as a pretty important piece of this very interesting ecosystem here. But look down the road a bit. Where do you see the collegiate landscape as it relates to NIL? Certainly where you guys will see yourself continuing to fit in. Where do you think the NCAA fits into this? Because they have seemingly been a little powerless in all of this. So yeah, give us a sense of where you think things are going to land, say 5 years down the road.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any of us know, but we do know that there are certain parties who are looking to invest in it because it's an industry that is growing and there's more passion and there's more viewership and there's more commercial opportunities now that brands can work directly with athletes. And so you're seeing private equity come in and kick the tires. And although it may not be a traditional private equity model, when they do finally get engaged with these athletic departments, there could be futures where these high revenue sports separate in some way, just because I don't know exactly what that'll look like, but I just know that it's feeling more and more difficult for the same rules to apply to some of these sports where there's so much money and that the expectations are a little different for those athletes versus the non-revenue sports. And you're starting to see some schools who are basically raising their hand saying, we're putting their hand down and saying they're opting out of participating in revenue sharing for the house settlement because they want to approach this in more of a historically traditional NCAA athletic model and true amateurism. So I think you're going to start to see it more professional and amateur. And I think over time, that gap it'll just look very different what's happening in the professional side versus the amateur side.
Listen, this has really been very informative. I thought I knew a lot about Opendorse. I clearly did not. Before we let you go, TJ, we have two questions we like to ask all our guests. The first one is,
Where'd your career get started? Where'd you start it?
I went to University of Maryland, go Terps, and we didn't have a formal sports marketing program. They actually just launched one, which I'm really excited about and want to be as much of a resource as I can for them. But there wasn't an existing one. But I would go to professional sporting. I'm a huge sports nut, like all of us, especially anybody who would be listening to this. And you go to a game and you look in the outfield and you see these signs, and I'm like, in its most simple form, I didn't know it was called sponsorship. I'm just a kid looking at them like, somebody talk to that brand and convince them to pay to want to be a part of this organization. And so I was like, that sounds awesome. Like, I just want to do that. I don't know what the heck it's going to take to do that. I didn't have any connections. But I went in front of a board at Maryland and got the curriculum approved to create my own individual study major called sports marketing. And I did married classes from the business school where we were taking marketing and management, and married that with classes in the kinesiology department, like psychology of sports, the history of sports, sport and society. Again, didn't know what I was going to do with that. Just knew I wanted to be there. And so I was lucky enough to land an internship with 𝘊𝘪𝘳𝘰 at Turnkey Sports. Len now is primarily focused on executive search, but at the time we were doing more market research. Specifically, we were doing things like feasibility studies for new stadiums and arenas. So for someone who didn't know anything, I was working at a Len's basement at the time. It was just an unbelievable chance to learn from someone like him, who was, he was an executive for the Detroit Red Wings and Dallas Stars. And so for me, I was just nerding out on all of it. Didn't know what I wanted to do from there. And then after working there for 5 years and helping build out the research side and sponsorship measurement side of that business before he sold it off a couple of years ago, I went to go work for the Yankees with Jim Ross when they were transitioning from the old stadium to the new stadium. And I was lucky enough to be the first full-time salesperson there. My first day of work was the last game in the old stadium. Started giving some hard hat tours and help sell out the premium section of the first year of Yankee Stadium. So that was fun. So I was there 2008 to 2010, and then I wanted to transition to the sponsorship side and went over to the Eagles from there.
okay, last question. Well, I lied. I have two more questions. The last question we ask every guest is, what advice do you have for somebody who's looking to break into the sports business?
Yeah, I like you guys, I'm sure we're all talking to young people who want to crack into this industry, and I'll be honest, the majority of them don't wind up following up, but it's a good way to filter people out. We all had to break through, and then we all had to stick through it. I don't meet many people who get in this industry and see success immediately and get paid a ton of money immediately. If they do, that's amazing. It's just rare. So it becomes a question of like, how bad do you want it? What are you willing to do? How much are you willing to stick with this? Because you're going to hit, like, I had so many interviews that I crashed and burned in the beginning, or I thought I crushed it and I didn't hear back. And you just have to fight through. And it's just, you have tunnel vision. You will not compromise, and you will not accept anything but making it in this industry. So if you do that and you treat people right, you work hard for people, you pay it forward, those things pay it off, because it is a very cool fraternity. Once you're in it, fraternity, sorority, whatever you want to call it, because these relationships are pretty special. Especially, I'm just super appreciative the further I get along in my career, to be able to call a lot of smart, successful people friends. And I think that network has grown just from nothing special other than treating people the right way, working really hard, and trying to help people when they're available. But for someone who's just starting out, you have to be able to, need to be prepared for adversity. And what are you going to do with that when you're met with that? Are you going to give up, or are you going to fight through it? So just fight through, keep pushing. And if you want it bad enough, you'll get it.
That's great advice. The last thing I was going to say is, if you guys ever think about starting a podcast or vertical on Opendorse, I know two guys who would love to sign up for the service. No, seriously, TJ, can't thank you enough for coming on. Some great insights into Opendorse, into the broader student athlete ecosystem. So we really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
No, thank you. This has been awesome. And we'll see you guys soon. Thanks so much.
And TJ, I'm not going to hold it over that I'm still bitter about the fact that Maryland is now in the Big Ten and left my ACC. But but other than that, I know working with Len and working with the Eagles with some great people there. I know you're good folks. So
yeah, I do miss the ACC. When I was there, we were an AC school, so I get it. But
yeah,
that's so it is right now. So
all right, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
We're back. Thank you again to TJ Ciro of Opendorse. Great guest, David. Really gave us some great insight into that whole ecosystem of student athletes and being compensated for their name, image, and likeness. But now is the time in the show where we take a look forward. So I will ask you, my friend, what are you looking forward to? What's on your radar?
Well, first of all, I think I'm going to be still catching my breath from the Masters this past weekend. I think we all are to a degree. We have the NBA playoffs starting, which we talked about earlier. The NHL playoffs are starting this weekend as well. And we're only about a month away from the tip-off of the new WNBA season. And one story I'm going to be watching, or I should say one thing I'll be watching for, is how the WNBA and the Dallas Wings promote around getting Paige Bueckers in the first pick in the WNBA draft, something that we talked about last week on the show. But the 2025 draft did not do the numbers that the 2024 WNBA draft did, which we didn't expect that it would. But we're still seeing continued growth. So the lift that we saw coming out of last year in the excitement around the WNBA, women's sports overall, that was somewhat led by Caitlin Clark, has continued. So, last year's WNBA draft drew 2.45 million viewers, which was humongous. This year, 1.25 million viewers on ESPN. So very successful, very high, again, moving the ship in the right direction here. And I think that's really the key. So I'm curious as to see if they're going to lean into Paige Bueckers, these other great players that came out of this draft. And the fact that Paige is going to Dallas and Luka is no longer in Dallas, to put a bow on what we talked about earlier in the show, how much they play, that they got this new star while they lost, obviously, one of the biggest stars in Luka Doncic to the Lakers.
What I tell clients whenever there's sort of a game-changing event, no pun intended, things always tend to revert to the mean. And that's what we're seeing with the numbers for the draft this year. But the mean is higher than it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So it continues to trend in an upward direction. What I liked about Paige Bueckers, there was some question as to whether or not she was going to try to force her way onto a different team. Dallas has not had a lot of success on the court in recent years, but she said all the right things. I'd like to believe that Dallas will build a marketing campaign around her, but more importantly, will build a team eventually around her of good supporting players, because she is, a fantastic basketball player. She has proven that over the last several years at UConn. She's overcome great adversity with her injuries, and so just another great moment in the ongoing story of the WNBA.
What about you?
Well, I'm looking forward to the NBA playoffs as well. And then I'm also a hockey guy, as you know, so I'm looking forward to the Stanley Cup playoffs. I truly believe the Stanley Cup is the hardest championship to win in sports. You have to win potentially up to 28 games. And at this point in the season, I don't think there's any guy on any club that's not beaten up. We have more Canadian teams in the playoffs this year than we've had in several years. And for the first time in history, I believe, one of the original 6 teams are not in the playoffs. So I should say the original American teams in the original 6. So Boston, New York, Detroit, and Chicago, none of them made the playoffs this year. So it'll be interesting. I don't know if you have Canadian teams that make deep runs in the playoffs, what Gary Bettman and the folks at the NHL will think about that from a ratings perspective, but there'll be some great hockey.
For sure.
So that brings another episode to a close. I want to thank TJ Ciro. David, thank you. But most of all, I want to thank our listeners. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, like, share, shoot us a comment. We're starting to spread our wings a little bit on social media. And so hopefully you'll find us in new places as we move forward. So until next week, he's DP, I'm McGhee, and we'll talk soon.